what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a supernatural horror film, The Canal. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. One day, David, a film archivist, meets up with his wife to go to a house viewing. After greeting the realtor, they enter the house and start looking around. David watches his wife go up the stairs and notices movement in the corner of his eye. He follows the strange figure and is led outside of the house, where he finds an open manhole. After looking around the house, they agree to buy the house. That night, David is awakened by the vibrations of his wife's phone. He asks her who it is, but before she can answer, their son Billy enters the room. David escorts Billy to the bathroom and tucks him into bed after. He asks her again who the texter was, and the wife tells him that it was only a coworker. She apologizes for having woken him up, and they share a tongue massage, which quickly turns into a fast and furious hormone game. But the wife does not seem to be satisfied by that, so David starts to suspect that something's up. The next morning, David and Billy are walking on the banks of the neighboring canal when Billy suddenly runs away. David chases after him, and they stop at a dirty public restroom. Billy tells his father that the toilets are allegedly haunted, but David doesn't believe him. He throws a rock into the restroom to see if any ghosts will come out, but none do. They leave, and David drops Billy off at school. At his office, David is approached by his blonde coworker, nicknamed Blondie. She tells him that they received some films from the police archive and asks David to look at them. While watching the footage, David discovers that a brutal murder took place in 1902, right in their very home. That night, David and his wife go out to a party. They leave Billy with a nanny and head out. At the party, the wife leaves David alone to meet with her client Alex. He orders a drink, but later sees Alex touching his wife's hormones. Alex notices David watching them, and they stop talking. When she returns, David asks her who the hormone-rich man was. The wife says that Alex is just a cash-rich client, but poor in hormones. Then she changes the topic immediately. They dance, and she apologizes to David for leaving him alone. The following day, David cannot get the image of his wife talking to another man out of his head. He is interrupted by Blondie, who tells him that he should finish watching the rest of the footage from the police archives. As he watches, David begins to imagine himself at the crime scene. The bloody clothes and dead bodies on the screen become more vivid. He soon imagines himself in the house, with blood dripping from the walls. He sees the victim getting stabbed repeatedly to death. The walls split open, revealing the killer inside. David wakes up, realizing that it was all a nightmare. The next day, David stalks his wife and sees her together with Alex. He follows their body scent and watches until his wife enters Alex's hormone-smelly house. Suddenly, he receives a call from his son, who he forgot to pick up from school. Later that night, David breaks into Alex's house, only to see his wife playing dirty with Alex. In anger, he grabs a hammer and prepares to kill Alex. But then he comes to his senses and leaves instead, tossing the hammer into the canal. Along the way, he throws up and enters the dirty restroom. He throws up in the toilet and sees someone standing outside the stall. Hand marks also appear from the top of the door. Suddenly, a ghost is seen whispering to David. David snaps out of it and tries to crawl out of the restroom. Outside, he sees his wife getting strangled to death by a mysterious figure. David hears her call out his name, telling him to stop, but a shadowy figure kills her before she is able to resist. The next morning, David wakes up in the restroom, unable to remember anything. He goes home and finds his wife missing. He calls her after showering, but she doesn't pick up. As David gets to the police station, he is still plagued by visions of what happened that night. Shortly after, the detective arrives and interviews David. David also hands the detective some photos of his wife for reference. Shortly after, a search party is assembled, and they begin the search for David's wife. David arrives home that night and sends the babysitter off. While he is alone in the house, he hears noises from Billy's room. He rushes upstairs and finds him sitting on the bed, staring at the corner of the room. Billy says that he misses his mother, and David comforts him. While hugging, David catches a glimpse of the ghost in the mirror. He looks behind him, but no one is there. The next day, the detective brings David to the canal. Inside the car, the detective informs David that Alex has come to the police station. He tells David that, according to Alex, the wife was planning to leave David. David cannot believe it, but the detective tells him that all of her friends agree with Alex. Given that the affair could be a motive for the murder, the detective asks David if he killed his wife. David strongly denies the accusations and blames Alex, but the detective says that Alex has an alibi and is definitely innocent. He adds that in most cases, the husband is always the killer. Shortly after, one of the policemen signals them over. They find the wife's body in the canal, and David tries to rush to her body but is held back. Later on inside the morgue, the coroner tells David that it was most likely an accident. They also found one of the wife's broken heels, which could explain how she fell into the canal and drowned. The coroner asks him if he knew that she was pregnant, but David is shocked by this information. After the wake, David tells Blondie that he lied to the police and that he actually saw his wife in bed with Alex. He tells her about the incident with the stranger in the restroom and how he saw the stranger choking his wife before he blacked out in the restroom. He feels guilty about not being able to save his wife. Blondie tells him to tell the police, but David is scared that he might get imprisoned, since he was at the crime scene on the night of his wife's death. David decides to find the stranger first before reporting to the police so that he would be proven innocent. The next day, David returns to the restroom and takes pictures. He goes to the office and looks up the old murders that happened near the canal. Blondie catches David and tells him to rest. He borrows some cameras from Blondie before he leaves. Later that night, he continues looking at the brutal murders from the files. He throws them in frustration, but accidentally hits the nanny. She tries to comfort him with her hormones, but he just sends her smelly body away. The next morning, David replays footage from his home and the canal that he took with the borrowed cameras. He suddenly finds the stranger standing behind him in the footage. He also sees the stranger walking around his house. After hearing noises, he hurries home with the footage. At home, he starts hearing noises in the walls. He calls the nanny and has her listen to the walls, but she doesn't hear anything. David tells her that he hears a voice whispering in prayer. Billy suddenly appears behind them and asks them what they are doing. David tells the nanny to tuck him back into bed. While alone, David digs a hole in the wall but finds nothing there. David suddenly hears noises coming from outside. Outside, he walks toward the open manhole and puts the cover back on. He turns around and sees the stranger standing in the window of Billy's room. He runs to Billy's room, but the stranger isn't there anymore. David sends Billy and the nanny to a hotel for their safety. He calls Blondie over to the house, shows her the stranger in the footage, and tells her that there are ghosts in the house. But Blondie doesn't believe his smelly bullshit, believing that he just want to trick her into seeing the adult film. But he insists that people used to see ghosts in the house. People also reported that a mysterious shadow was the one making the killings, similar to his wife's death. However, Blondie thinks that David is crazy and probably just exhausted. Later on, David video calls Billy, who is in the hotel. A ghost appears behind Billy. David tells Billy to turn the laptop around so that he can see the rest of the room. Billy follows, and David sees the stranger standing in the corner. The host quickly approaches Billy. David quickly ends the call and runs to the hotel. When David arrives at Billy's room, he sees no one but Billy and the nanny inside. Because he is worried, he brings them both back into the house. At the house, the nanny tells David that she will be quitting the job as she is scared and doesn't understand what's happening. The nanny tells David that he should get some help, but he shrugs it off. David tells her to stay in the room with them, but she declines the offer. The nanny suddenly wakes up in her room. She stands up to look around the room, but is pushed down onto the bed by an unseen force. She stands back up, but is forced down again. David arrives and pulls her away from the bed and out of the room. He drags her downstairs and locks her in a closet. David searches the house, but does not find anyone else. He returns and lets her out. David asks them if she saw anyone in her room. The nanny doesn't respond and tries to get Billy as she doesn't trust David, but he pulls Billy away from her. Afraid of David, the nanny runs back to her room. The next morning, David and Billy walk by the canal. David stops and sees a shadow in the grass. He points to it and asks Billy if he can see it, but Billy doesn't. Later that day, David sets up a camera to catch the ghost. He tells Billy to get back, and Billy hides behind the wall. David closes his eyes and starts recording. The shadow emerges from the bush and approaches the camera. David opens his eyes, but sees no one there. He heads to the office and tells Blondie to develop the film. She agrees, but tells him to consider therapy and counseling. That night, David sprinkles powder on the floor for him to see the footsteps of anyone that enters the house. Later that night, David suddenly wakes up. He sees a killer from the 1902 murders, grabbing the glass of water beside him. David looks around and sees the killer's other victims. The killer then wraps up a dead body. As David looks at the killer, the body suddenly sits up and screams. David wakes up from the nightmare, notices the door open, and sees a shadow walk away. He checks the powder in the hallways and finds tracks. He returns to the room and circles the glass with chalk to mark its position. In the morning, David finds the glass missing. He also finds the detective sitting in front of him. He tells David to come with him. In the car, the detective tells David that they found a hammer in the canal with his fingerprints. The detective confirms that the hammer was from the lover's house and that it disappeared on that same night. David tells the detective about the 1902 murders in his house. He tells him that he has footage, but the detective only laughs at him. When the detective later tells David that he is unfit to take care of Billy, David's lawyer responds that they can only decide on Billy's custody after a psychiatrist's report on David is acquired. However, David refuses to get tested and leaves the station. On the way home, police tail David. That night, David tells Billy that he will never leave him and they will always be together. While Billy is sleeping, David inspects the hole in the wall again. Inside, he finds old pictures of a demonic cult. Suddenly, he hears noises downstairs and finds footsteps in the powder. He follows the tracks and enters the manhole that he once closed. In the tunnels, he finds a dead baby and accidentally knocks it into the water. A hand begins to emerge from the water and David runs away. Blondie arrives at the house with a developed film. Blondie tells David that he called her last night to say something about his wife, but David says he doesn't remember. Blondie worriedly tells him to turn himself in and she will testify for his good character. Out of nowhere, David tells her that they used to sacrifice children in the house. He tells her that they used babies because their blood was the most powerful and that they took the bodies out through the sewers and dumped them in the canal. Blondie gets upset and tells him to shut his big mouth. She asks him if he killed his wife, but David stays silent. Blondie starts mouth-comforting him, but David doesn't respond, so she stops. The two start watching the footage. Hoping to see some adult actions, Blondie loses interest and can't see anything at first, but later notices the shadow. The shadow slowly walks closer until it covers the screen entirely. Suddenly, the shadow begins to emerge from the hole in the wall and strangles Blondie. To his shock, the ghost drags her into the wall. David leaves the house in fear with his son. After running into the detective, they run back into the house. David heads into the sewers and is chased by the police. David suddenly gets a flashback to earlier and stops. He sees himself with Blondie in the room, watching the footage. There is no shadow on the screen, but David forces Blondie to look closer. Frustrated that she doesn't see anything, David begins strangling her and kills her, as the ghosts of the cult members watch behind him. It can be deduced that David was possessed by a demon, and he was the one that actually killed Blondie. David continues running and sees flashbacks of the dirty restroom. Inside the stall, David hears the stranger tell him that the master wants her. Suddenly, he sees himself confronting his wife about her hormone cheating. He watches as a possessed version of himself pushes her into the canal and drowns her. He then sees the wife's ghost, with blood dripping down her legs. A deformed baby comes out and she approaches David. Terrified, David runs away as her ghost keeps chasing him. While running, he falls into the canal with his son. He tries to swim up, but a hand grabs his leg and prevents him. As he is pulled down, he releases Billy, whom the detective manages to save from drowning. David dies in the depths of the canal. The next morning, Billy notices a crack in the wall while getting his books. An eye appears, and David's voice calls out to him. The voice tells Billy that he is with the mother now and asks him if he wants their family to be complete again, and even tells him how to reach them. Billy eventually leaves with his grandmother. As they drive away, Billy removes his seatbelt and dies after exiting the car at full speed. Because of that, their family is finally complete again, but as ghosts. The final scene shows a realtor closing up the house. Billy is seen closing the door to his room, indicating that he too has become part of the ghosts in the house. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.